Welcome to Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. I'm JJ Flizanes, your host. I'm excited that you're here today. We have an awesome show with Laurie Kazan. It's one of 3 or 4 that we do in the course of this podcast, and it's about tapping into your psychic abilities. I work with a lot of really intuitive and psychic people. I'm from Lynn Boutrous, who's been on the show as a medical intuitive, to Lisa Thomas, who's going to be coming on the show soon, who is probably the most powerful energy worker, clearer, healer I've ever worked with. Lynn is amazing as a medical intuitive, and it's a very specific kind of work that she does, as well as a therapist. Lisa's not a therapist. She actually clears inherited emotional DNA. You're going to be very excited to work with her. And then there's Laurie, and Laurie is a psychic that's also very different than the two of them. She's got specific information in so many different ways, and I think she empowers people also to tap into their own psychic abilities, and that's what today's show is really about. A quick reminder, we do have a free 30-day manifestation coming up, and we'll get to that a little bit later in the show. So you'll hear the website address for that if you don't already know. And then also, in case you don't know, I launched a new book, and it's called The Invisible Fitness Formula. And so if you're interested, you can check it out at theinvisiblefitnessformula.com. Enjoy the show. Today's show, tapping into your psychic ability. We have with us Laurie Kazan. Laurie was chosen as one of the top psychics in a worldwide audition for the prestigious Edgar Cayce Institute, which is the Association for Research and Enlightenment. Many call her their secret weapon for her powerful ability to supply information that allows them to earn more money, make better decisions, and experience greater success, especially in love and in business. An award-winning writer, she also holds a Master of Fine Arts degree in writing. Her extensive knowledge of psychology and the psychic sciences reflect a lifelong interest in deepening her understanding of human nature. Her highly popular workshops include prosperity, meditation, tarot, psychic development, and creating your future. Ms. Kazan is known as a spiritual psychic and a wise guide. Welcome to the show, Laurie.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
I'm looking forward to this show, tapping into your psychic ability. So very impressive resume, and I want you to share with us when that all started. Like, when did you know you were psychic?
Well, when people ask me that, I always wonder, did you know you weren't psychic? And I guess truthfully for me, I didn't think of it as being psychic, but intuitive. And years later, when I was part of a study, I was studied as I'm one of those highly sensitive people. Why do people like me pick up on other people's thoughts and feelings and things that happen in the world? So I was part of a study. And they said that intuition, that Edgar Cayce, the most documented psychic in history, said that intuition was actually really profound, in some ways more important than the psychic, which the psychic might tell you you're going to see a person in a blue shirt on such and such a street on Thursday. But what intuition does is guide you in your life and how to deal with things and how to create things. So having them work together is really powerful. So when I was studied by them, many years later, from when I was an adult, I ended up working as a psychic. I was in a study called Battered Boundaries, where a bunch of us were studied for why we were picking up on so many things that was really none of our business. As a child, I was I guess I was different. I mean, that's how my uncle always says I seem different to him, but I was sensitive. I was sensitive to things. There was a lot of chaos in my home. And my mother would ask me to predict things. What was my father going to do? What was going to happen? I've done a regression where I've gone back. I mean, I'm sure some of your listeners are going to think this is nuts, but you can go through a hypnotic process where you can go back to the womb. And I can go back to thinking, connecting with my mother from the womb and thinking things about what she was thinking. So I didn't know that was psychic. I didn't think of it as being psychic. I thought of it as being able to take care of myself and depend on myself by knowing certain things that were chaotic in my world, to be able to predict how bad they would be and if I could get myself out of the way before they happened, or conduct myself in such a way that I wouldn't set one of my parents off. And so that was my life. I just always depended on that skill to know which way to go, which way not to go.
What point did you decide it was psychic or highly intuitive?
Well, I knew I'd had a lot of experiences of knowing when someone was going to die or picking up on things. And I think it was around, I was graduating from getting my master's degree in writing, so grad school in the 90s, early 90s. And I had read something in one of the Edgar Casey magazines about people writing in to say if you'd had certain kinds of experiences. They were looking for people who had had these experiences. And I wrote a letter to Dr. Henry Reed, and I talked about having had those experiences, but they were looking for people who had negative experiences, and I had positive and negative. If I'd sit next to anybody, they'd be thinking something, and suddenly I'd start thinking it, and I'd be thinking, why am I thinking about this? I don't even know why this is coming into my mind. And then the person might say something. So I wrote to Henry Reed and told him about that. And as I was graduating and things were kind of falling apart, strangely enough, I got a call from him saying they wanted me to be part of this battered boundary study. And I had forgotten I'd written the letter, and I was saying, well, you don't want me. You want people with negative things, and I have negative and positive, and I'm just getting my master's degree. And he said, no, that's great. You're getting it in writing, and that's very right-brained, and people tend to be right-brained who are intuitive, and so be part of this study. So I think in my life, I being a more introverted and one of those people that people said, "Oh, you're too sensitive." I always thought, "You don't want me. It's not me." Whatever it is you're looking for, it's not me. And I think because having grown up, where you tell people stuff that you see, and they say, "You don't see that. I don't see that. That's not happening," and then it happens. So I'd had so much of that in my life, and I was having that even as I was going through this master's program where I pick up on something. I had a tendency to pick up on the thing that nobody was supposed to know, and I thought everybody knew, so I might say it out loud, and it would cause a bit of a problem. And so when the psychic came in, the idea of working as a psychic, I was part of this study, and we had a couple of different assignments. And one of the assignments, they paired us up with an Atlantic University student. And the student and I were supposed to do this process where the student who was paired with me was in Virginia, so she was 3 hours ahead of me in Los Angeles. So 6 o'clock my time, 9 o'clock her time, we were supposed to tune into each other and meditate on each other and see what we got. And we were doing this, I think, for a month or more. And I got all sorts of information and all sorts of warnings for the person that I was set up with. And in fact, I was very concerned about some things that she was doing in her life. So, what we found was a lot of us ended up being used like the person's personal psychic because we were getting so much information. Edgar Casey, as I mentioned, talked about who was really, I've never seen anybody read to the extent Edgar Casey did. I know there are people who say they can, I've yet to see it. And he talked about that we all have this in us, and that some of the tools to connect with your soul, to connect with other people, were like doing this simultaneous meditation. So I was paired with two different people, and it seems as if everybody who was part of that study ultimately ended up doing some work in the psychic world because we did become like personal psychics to people. Oh, and what we also, the study was, I actually ended up, because nobody really wrote up the study, so I took this stuff and tried to find out, so what do we find at the end of it? Like being this highly sensitive person, what does it mean? Why are you given this? And what one of the things that came out of it is that if you're having these psychic episodes or intuitive episodes, a lot of times it scares people. I shouldn't know this. Why am I picking up on this? Or I don't want to be weird. But it's kind of like the universe giving you a nudge and saying, you need to develop this in yourself. Everybody has it. Casey in his reading said, everybody can do this. Well, how? He created the Search for God study groups because he talked about, and I tend to agree with it, why I bring up Casey so much, and I am a reader for the Casey Institute, but why I so connect with Casey is because he was really a spiritual mystic. And he talked about if you want to be more psychic, be more spiritual. And I've gone through so many really hellish times in my life, for lack of for a shortcut way of saying it, that I've had to use, no matter how spiritual I think I am, or I'm a good person, and it's kind of like, how can I connect deeper? How can I cooperate more with other people and not make, people I don't like the enemy, or work on things in myself? There are a lot of people that teach techniques. There are techniques of grounding, and we can talk about all of that stuff, and they're good techniques. But my feeling goes back to what Casey said, which is the kind of person you are, who you're being, meditating. He talked very much about meditating and connecting with your higher self. Well, he talked about, for him, because he was a Christian mystic, he talked about the Christ consciousness. And you could call Christ, if you're Jewish or you're Hindu or whatever, you don't have to call it the Christ. You can think of it as a master teacher, the Messiah, or I don't know what all the different, um, and connecting with something with a higher vibration, which is what I try to do in my readings. I know I'm sort of skipping around a bit, but that's sort of the curse and the blessing of having being a little bit more right-brained. Go ahead.
No, no, it's fine. And I'm so glad that you actually just said all of that for a couple different reasons. The first thing is most psychics that I have talked to or worked with or had sessions with, some of them will say sort of you're either born with it or you're not. So I never like that answer
Mm-hmm.
because I don't necessarily believe. Now, while I do believe some people it comes very easily.
Mm-hmm.
So like you're talking about being right brained, the more right brained you are, the more you feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes where I used to get caught up more was and still is to a certain extent in explaining and being able to really take people through a experiential analysis of, is this coming from my head? Is this coming from my subconscious?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I picking up on something outside of me
Mm-hmm.
that then I am having a picture? And what's actually happened recently to me with the transition of my cat Doc, I have been working with another medical intuitive who's been on the show, and in an energy healing kind of way. And because I've been feeling him very profoundly, like I feel his energy still here.
Mm-hmm.
And all of my other animals who have passed on usually come to me in a dream, and I feel this little bit of a completion and them saying, we're good, I'm okay, I'm still I'm
Mm-hmm.
still non-physical energy, but we're good. And then that's like the completion. And I haven't had that experience here. And so what's been happening is I've been learning, like you mentioned, in terms of whether it be grounding or how to integrate, or it's the learning again from yourself, like how you're picking up on the messages, the higher vibration. And what he was here to teach me so clearly now after the fact is that because I could feel his presence, I had to toggle, because I have about equal left and right brain.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had to toggle between understanding, and which is great for me because I'm the one who's going to analyze it and then try to teach it to others, right?
Mm-hmm.
um is that I would think about him in my mind and then get sad because I would visualize the past, and I would bring pictures up of the past. And what I wasn't doing, and what Lynn had helped me to do, was to take his physical energy right now as it is in non-physical form that's still here with me, and to acknowledge it in a different way without my head, and to sort of absorb it in my body, and
Mm-hmm.
to be present with that, and to take it in differently. And because of that, it's like actually bridging the gap between the spiritual beliefs that I
Mm-hmm.
have and then the actual integration of the energy of that, and like living it in your cells like that. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like understanding water or being in water.
Yeah.
Like it's really like, okay, I get the concept of water, I can see water, I can touch water, but it's a lot different when you're actually in it.
Mm-hmm.
You're completely it resonates at a different, deeper level. And so because of all of that, my cat Domino, we integrated a kitten into our house a couple weeks ago, and I had come back from a trip after she'd been here for 3 days, and I wanted to pull her into the room and spend some time with her so she knew she was number one, and because I could feel her being sad, and like this kitten was just, annoying her, and she
Mm-hmm.
felt like she was being replaced. And then the first night we spent together, she was happy that I had locked the door and it was just her and I in the guest room. And then the second night, when I said, "Okay, Domino, come on in," she came in. I shut the door. I turned the light off. I crawled into bed, and she was sitting by the door, and she wasn't coming up on the bed. And so I had a flashlight, and I looked up. I was like, like, "What's going on? What's up?" And I literally clearly heard her say to me, "It's okay, Mom. I'm ready to go back in the main bedroom now."
Oh,
And so I went, "Oh." And of course, the normal average person's going to think I'm nuts too by saying that. And it's like, did I really hear that or did I make it up? But literally it came so quickly,
mm-hmm.
and it felt so true. There wasn't even a hesitation on any level. And so I opened the door and we went into the bedroom, and that was the first night she and the kitten slept in the bed with both of
Wow.
us. So it's that, but it's a process. It's almost like exercise in a way where you're
Mm-hmm.
getting stronger. It's like you're practicing tuning into those vibrations, to the higher vibrations, to the meditation, to the heart space, to the frequencies, and the more you do it. So I loved everything you just said because it really resonates, as well as gives hope for anyone who wants to become more psychic or have that kind of ability, right?
Yes, and one of the things we did in the Battered Boundaries study group is that we were to keep a journal. And that was good. I mean, I'd always kept journals, but we were specifically keeping a journal. I don't remember exactly how it was phrased, but on our experiences. And as I would write things down, I'd see that I picked up on a lot of things. I was picking up on clues all the time because for a lot of people, you just know something. And that happens to me a lot. I just know. I don't know how I know, I just know. So for anybody wanting to develop themselves, keeping a journal is a good idea, noticing all the little things. I wish I still did that because as you were talking, I thought of when my cat Clarissa passed. It was very devastating for me. She was, they're all special, but some are more like people. And but I remember I wrote it down somewhere. There was one point where it was like this big burst of light came out, and I felt like it was she, as this golden light that just sort of went. I don't remember if it went into me or where it went, but I remember this golden light and feeling like, oh, that's Clarissa. So when you were talking, I was also thinking about how we have expectations of how things are supposed to be. If you have a near death experience, you're supposed to go, this is how other people have presented it, so you should have it this way, or this is how it's happened to you in the past. And I think that part about not making it be a certain way, maybe you can ask the universe, have it be a certain way, and you can make those negotiations. But you can also, I think part of the right brain, the non-analytical side, is allowing things, like I didn't expect that burst of golden light to happen. There was a series of things, and then with Clarissa, there was that burst of golden light, and and I felt something with it. And one of the other things you sort of alluded to or mentioned has to do with taking action on your perception. Very often, what happens is we think, "I wish I had." For me, well, I wish I had done, or it's kind of like saying to your inner self when you take an action of trust, I'm going to follow through. I am listening. I do. It's like doing inner child work where you take the action of what you get. And I think you were mentioning about, is it me? Am I picking up? Because we question ourselves. And in fact, I was doing that this morning. A friend was talking about a problem she was having at work, and I got an immediate hit on something. And so I've been sitting with it because I'm going to have her come over later or whatever and say that person's name with her name and make sure I'm getting it like I think I am. We call it the psychic science, and there's people trying to make it science, but that's a whole other conversation in itself because you get it how you get it. And sometimes I will think not to say something in a reading because my mind will be going, well, that's not psychic enough. But really, it's something the other person didn't know. It's my judgment saying it's not good enough. So the more that we can do work on ourselves, any kind of transformational process, landmark education, I don't know, Tony Robbins, whatever it is, therapy, it clears the debris out of the way. Because sometimes when I read for someone who hasn't done the inner work, it's like looking at a really messy closet, like a closet just stuffed with things. And I'm looking for where's the core. I'll tell them, we'll write questions down. And even if they don't tell me, when they've written them down, it's kind of like it makes it sort of more orderly. But I'm looking and I'm trying till I'm like pulling out a lot of stuff. What I'm looking for is what are the core, what's going to really change their life? What is the core issue here? And like all of us, when we want psychic readings, and I've certainly done it, and like I'll ask for something. If I listen to a reading I've had with somebody, it'll be on somebody in my life that no longer has any, it's like not a big deal for me anymore. And what will really last are the spiritual principles that someone's told me to look at in myself or develop in myself or given me an analogy to something in their lives. Because whatever it is I asked about that was of the moment will have worked out or not. And we all kind of like psychic phenomenon. When I tell people psychic phenomenon, they really seem to love it when I write about it. I think so much of the psychic and intuitive isn't quite so dramatic. I mean, maybe it's dramatic if you think it shouldn't be happening, but it's just so many. When I did that journal for the battered boundaries, there were so many subtle signals that if I'm writing all the time, I'm picking up, oh, I'm noticing this, I'm noticing that, and then they all contribute.
And I want there's so much coming up for me about how to list in a left brain way
Yeah.
for people who are listening, how to, because you've just mentioned some and I've been writing them down, how to actually start working on in tapping into your psychic ability. So I want to do that. Before we do that, I do need to take a break and thank our sponsors. Are you consciously using the law of attraction in your everyday life? How would you like some accountability and structure provided for you so you can easily start attracting more good into your life? Join us for the next 30-day manifestation challenge. Go to fit2love.tv/30daym. That's FIT, the number 2, LOVE.tv/30DAYM. 30-day M. Well, you'll be provided completely for free a 30-day packet including audios, instructions, and accountability in the form of a private Facebook group where we share our manifestations with each other every day and we keep each other accountable for doing the work. Join us for the next 30-day manifestation challenge. Come on over to fit2love.tv/30daym. Okay, Lori, so what's coming up for me big time? You mentioned journaling, and I know I'm gonna give the floor back to you, but I wanna talk about what I've heard and what's coming to me, and then I want you to finish us out with what you think in a structured way. Point 1, 2, 3, whatever is the best ways for people to start tapping into their psychic ability. Number one, you mentioned the journaling in order to start picking up on those subtle clues that people are getting. The trust you mentioned, right? Trusting that what you heard and not second guessing it. And the right brained. So you talked about, that a lot of right brain people feel more and they're probably a little closer to their psychic abilities maybe than someone who's left brain. And then you also mentioned about doing work and becoming more spiritual and healing wounds and clearing out the debris, so to speak. And one theme that keeps coming up for me in all of this is about being present. And because if I have to be present to journal, I have to be reflective to journal. I have to trust in the moment. There has to be a deep calming peace and about me and the universe and whatever in that moment without too much over analyzing in a left brain kind of way, right? And then the right brain part is all of our creative emotional being, but I also know that people who are very right brain can get a little too bogged down in all of those emotions and not necessarily be any more present than someone who's left brain.
I'm going to interrupt you for a second because even I just want your listeners to get that you don't have to be calm and peaceful. You can, journal, I hate this. I don't know what's going on. I'm going to free write. I'm going to set a clock and free write for 5 minutes and not worry about anything. And it can be write anything that comes to mind. It's like letting things out, not keeping them stuffed inside, and more will be revealed. And in terms of the right brain, I can be very out of body, and it's not good to do that. It makes it hard to manifest in this life when you're, somewhere else. So I don't mean to throw you off, I agree. Meditation is a really good one. Keeping track of your dreams, understanding that if you tend to be intuitive psychic, you may not fit in. Don't even try to fit in with other people. Don't try to, the people pleasing, all of that. It takes patience, it takes practice. You can learn things like remote viewing, which is another topic, but you can learn. There's literally analytic things they teach people. Will you be as good as somebody that's naturally good at it? Probably not, but you might end up being better than they are because you're good at practicing. And people like me don't like to practice the analytical, like for the remote viewing, there's a lot of steps, and I rather just get to the intuition. So there's all different ways of approaching. So no matter who you are, you can resonate with your own soul. And we tend to be judgmental. I shouldn't be here. I should be there. And some of that journal can tell you if you can do it listening like an upturned bowl without judgment, like, okay, this is where I am in this second. Who says it isn't psychic enough? Who says it isn't whatever it is enough?
And is it possible for someone to be like have psychic abilities more about themselves than others? I have a friend who is intuitive, but she has a block when it comes to herself.
Most it's harder to be yourself. Sometimes I do it through dreams. I'll ask if I need an answer to something, I'll ask for a dream to give me the answer, and then I'll write the dream down the next day, or I'll do it a few days in a row. It's harder to do that for yourself, but there are times where we ignore something in ourselves because it doesn't fit our pictures, and I think that's why the basis of it is always consciousness to me. The more you can put the past in the past, find out who you are, what your prejudices are, what your angers are, you can clear that closet I was talking about so that more of you can step forward. And one of the things like we see in remote viewing, which is where you might look at a sealed you look at the envelope is sealed and you're reading the picture, you're drawing the picture that's inside, is we confront this part of the mind that says, I can't do this. This is not possible. And then you go beyond it.
So what's coming up for me right now is in the conversation about being psychic for yourself or others and sort of that the emotional vibrational frequency. In the law of attraction work with
Hmm.
Abraham, there's a phrase or that says get in the vortex and then follow the impulse. And I guess that to me seems like it would be sort of psychic in a way. It's almost like get yourself aligned
Hmm.
and then follow whatever comes to you,
Hmm.
that impulse of action or desire or yearning, so to speak, and whatever it leads you to. And in a way, that's kind of psychic, right? That's sort of picking up on the energies that are
Yeah, and I
directing
think,
you.
and the other thing is that people see the psychic on TV and they think it's like looking into a window and everything's clear and mapped out, and sometimes it is, but a lot of times, and even for Edgar Casey and people like that, it's like we hit up against other problems. It's not going to remove. Oh, I want to be more psychic, so I have more control, and you're gonna, no matter what you do in this life, there's problems, and the solving of them, or simply being with the untying the little strings and knots of it is how we learn, and we make progress each time. Again, I'm going to go back to Casey, who was told that one of the lives in which he became the most psychic was where he was buried alive. Now, if you asked any of us, do we want that to be more psychic? I think the answer would be no. But, he talked about bringing in the readings that came through that he brought things forth from different lives that you've achieved or you've accomplished. And we don't like to sit and work at problems. Often people want a reading so they won't have any problems. But there are certain basic tenets of that spirituality, cooperation with others, learning to respond instead of react. There's a lot. I know we're limited on time, and I tend to go all over the place, so I don't want to bring too many topics in. So you can bring me back to the list things, and we'll go.
Yeah, so I'll reel you into the structure. So,
Okay.
Lori, let me list what I have heard, and then you fill in any blanks. Journaling, working on yourself, tapping into your right brain and your emotions, trusting. What else would you say someone could do to help tap into their psychic ability?
One of the things that Casey mentioned is to set an ideal for yourself. So that ideal might be love for the year. You can change it if you want, but love, compassion, whatever, some kind of spiritual ideal. And then you have it like a measure. I mean, he had ways of mapping it out, but you have a kind of measuring tool. Am I being loving? Yes, but I would be loving, but this person did such and such, so I'm not going to act, and you can, it doesn't mean you have to suddenly, oh, I better behave this way, but you can look at yourself. It's one of the ways, what are the guidelines? Because we all think we know everything because we don't know where our blind spots are. We don't know what we don't know, we don't know. Psychic can fill in the blind spots. One of the ways that I started in the 80s in a tough relationship, I would write, I'd ask God to speak through me, and I'd do writing with my right hand, and then I'd write with my left hand and answer it. And, asking the higher power, whatever you want to call it, to give me answers. And I got a lot of answers that way. And I learned to be ambidextrous so I could write with both hands, but then I didn't have to do it with my left hand anymore. So that's another technique that I didn't mention earlier. And there's provisions, or, provisos around that.
And just to be clear, the right hand is because
I'm
that's
right-handed. Yeah, you're right.
Well, but isn't it that the left side is the receiving side?
Yeah, but nobody's ever come up quite. There have been psychics who have decided how it should be, like Bevi Jaggers, how she worked. But supposedly, if you're right-handed, then your non-dominant hand is the hand you use. So it would be the left hand, which normally I do like to have people pull. If we're doing tarot, I like them to pull cards with their non-dominant hand. But sometimes when they're left-handed, I'll still ask them to pull with their left hand if I feel. So I do it on a case-by-case thing. But yeah, the left is the receiving. So yes, you're right.
Okay. But no, I'm glad you corrected me in saying non-dominant hand, because that makes more sense too.
Yeah.
Versus just left and right receiving and giving. So now if someone wants to have a reading with you, we are going to be having Lori back for more than one more show for sure. We're actually going to be talking about life destiny numbers on the next show. So stay tuned and watch the Freedom Friday schedule for that. But let's say someone's listening and they're like, wow, well, I want to have her help me or do a reading for me. How can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can go to my website, which is I Love My Psychic, PSYCHIC.com. I Love My Psychic.com. My phone number is there. They can email me at Lori, LORRIE, at Lori Kazan, KAZAN.com. I have free newsletters and things. I send out a weekly, or I think it's going to be bi-weekly, prosperity meditation, and I write psychic newsletters. So there's a lot of free things on my site, a lot of articles. I review books. But to reach me, Lori at LoriKazan.com.
And we're going to have all of Lori's links and everything on the show notes under her page at fittolove.tv. And Lori, you do work with people in other countries too, right?
Yeah, I work with people all over the world.
Okay, just making sure that the show is currently being downloaded in over 125 countries. 80% is the U.S., but I just want to make sure if someone's listening somewhere else that they know they still can work with you. So
I work primarily on the phone, so I can work with people. I have a lot of clients in Dubai and India and France and England and then people just locally, So yes, people all over the world.
Okay, so we have given you plenty of information. You've heard me try to streamline in a linear way. So go back and listen to the show again if you need to take better notes about all the different ways to tap into your psychic ability. But most likely the one that felt the best to you is the right first step. So definitely check that out. And then look for Lori to come back for your life destiny number. Lori, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you again for tuning in to Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. If you're inspired and want more, come on over to fittolove.tv and check out our Freedom Fridays or find us on iTunes. More at Fit to Love, physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness for the happy life you deserve.